Allies had closed up to the Rhine all the way from Arnhem to within a mile of Koblenz. But this had involved some of the heaviest fighting of the war, reminiscent of Caen and Falaise on the part of Canadian and United Kingdom troops. Their job was to drive the Germans back from their Wesel bridgehead. This they succeeded in doing against very strong and resolute opposition. Pictures of the town of Xanten, only 1 mile from the Rhine, show plenty of signs of the sort of struggle that had been fought out here. The town had been wiped out. Not a single building was undamaged, and most were completely ruined. It was a key town at the north of the German bridgehead, and the Hun held on desperately so as to get as many troops as possible back to the east of the Rhine. South to the university city of Bonn, incidentally the birthplace of Beethoven. Bonn fell to the Americans about the same time as the Canadians and United Kingdom forces entered Xanten. Resistance in Bonn was comparatively light, but the Hun had made no mistake about blowing up the bridge across the Rhine. As we know, it was quite a different story at Remagen, where the opportunity to seize the bridge intact was taken and exploited with great skill and daring. AK gunners were kept very busy warding off German attacks on the bridge. The Hun did his best to destroy the bridge by bombing, dive bombing and shelling, but although there were casualties among the American AK gunners, the bridge was preserved against all attacks, and prisoners were brought over from the east bank by the thousand. South again to a village about 6 miles from Koblenz. Here the Americans liberated considerable numbers of men of various Allied nationalities who had been taken prisoner by the Germans. French, Russians, Poles, Yugoslavs, all were making their way back to France. One large group assembled in the square had the pleasure of watching a batch of German prisoners being rounded up for search and examination by American military police. They had a good laugh at the Huns, who affected to take no notice. On the outskirts of the village, American infantrymen following up their tanks were busy mopping up. The Hun was properly on the run, and as a rule, a few rounds fired at a position still holding out promptly brought forth still more prisoners, only too anxious to reach the security of capture. The town of Bad Godesberg had also been taken by the Americans. It was occupied with very little opposition. Only at a few points in the town was firing necessary. For the most part, it was a matter of going through the place and clearing out the Hun from a few strong points or hiding places. Godesberg, of course, is the place where Hitler came halfway to meet Chamberlain during the crisis of 1938. This is the hotel where they met and talked. It seems, well, in fact it is, a long time since then, and the scene in Godesberg is vastly different. Then the British Prime Minister tried to call a halt to German aggression without a resort to arms. Now, German prisoners, including their commander on this sector, are rounded up at the very spot where the Führer had met our Premier. But in spite of the contrast, there are points of similarity. In 1938, the people of Godesberg had cheered and apparently welcomed the coming of Chamberlain. Even now, they cheer and apparently welcome the coming of the Americans. With white flags and smiles and waving, they exude goodwill. But this time, nobody in his right senses will believe them.